So I'm Nikos Papakostas. I'm co-founder of Interalia, and I'm delighted today to present to you the first panel of the day related to policies of integration and policies of segregation in a European context within the framework of our conference titled Potentials and Limitations of Subnational Responses to the Migrant Question in Europe. With no further ado, or maybe a couple of technical issues that you can write your questions in the chat. We are inviting representatives of municipalities and cities to take the floor and have short contributions or questions to the speakers following their intervention. So hopefully there will be some kind of a lively debate. Without further ado, I give to you Dr. Antonis Karvounis. He's responsible for Europe for Citizens program of the European Union. Dr. Karvounis, thank you very much for joining us today. The floor is yours. Thank you. Dr. Karvounis, I think we have a problem here hearing you. Not yet. Dr. Karvounis, you can hear us, but we don't hear you. Is this the case? All right. Now you're unmuted. But we still cannot hear you. Now, Dr. Karvounis, could you please disconnect and reconnect? So after all, it will take a couple of more minutes to start, while our plan was to start at 9:30 sharp. Thank you for your patience. We wait for Mr. Karvounis to reconnect, and hopefully we'll start in a couple of minutes. Dr. Karvounis, maybe you could unmute and try out now. Still no. Adonis, our technical supervisor, please take the floor to let us know, Adonis know what he should do.
Καλημέρα κύριε Καρβούνη.
Καλημέρα.
Σας ακούμε.
Ναι. Okay. Okay, now...
Problem solved. Okay, the floor is yours, Dr. Karvounis.
Good morning to everybody. Sorry for that. I'm not good at the technical issues. I would like first to thank Interalia for inviting me for this important event, especially everything has to do with Europe for Citizens. For me, it's very important. I've been, as Nico said, contact point for over 15 years for the program since 2006. And these events make me feel much better because I think that I have put, some effort to disseminate the goals, the objectives of the program at a national level. And Inter alia has responded, especially this programming period, 2014-2020, I think very well, participating in many projects, either as leader or as a partner. So I'm very glad to lead, to facilitate this panel with this very interesting topic concerning the policy of segregation and integration. An issue that has a very, I think is very high on EU agenda, but I don't want to make long introductions. I think we have here the experts to talk about this issue. Ms. Laura Corando, Head of Unit of Legal Pathways Integration from the European Commission, and Ms. Melina Vaskalaki, Executive Advisor for Migrants and Refugees at the Municipality of Athens. So right away, I give the floor to Ms. Laura Corando, and later on, we'll have a fruitful discussion on this issue. Ms. Corando, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I'm really glad to be here at this conference to talk about integration and in particular the cooperation with the local and regional authorities. I don't know if there is a presentation, if the slide will be now shown by the organizers, but I will already start talking about the action plan as an introduction. So you might be aware that last November, we have adopted as the Commission a new action plan on integration and inclusion. This is something that is linked, of course, to the Migration Pact, because integration and inclusion, they really underpin the policies on migration and asylum, but also is part of the broader EU social agenda. And we have had a lot of other initiatives on social Europe, on non-discrimination. Just yesterday, the Commission adopted the action plan on the implementation of the social pillar. We had the action plan on the fight against racism. So all of this, it's of course connected, and the overall objective being really to have cohesive and inclusive European societies where everybody belongs, including of course the migrants. In this action plan, we had a number of thematic areas. For example, access to education and training, access to labor market, access to health and housing for migrants, and a number also of horizontal strands and areas of activities. One of which is building partnerships, indeed, and this is something which I will develop with different stakeholders and including local and regional authorities. Also ensuring synergies between the funds, the European funds available for integration, and of course, I will also say a bit more about this. Fostering encounters and participation and exchanges with civil society between migrants and local communities. This is really a very important point. And then the monitoring also on integration outcomes and so on. Now, on the building strong partnerships, this is something that the Commission has invested a lot in the last years to really create strong partnerships with the different actors involved on integration. Okay, you can go to slide 3 directly now. Thank you. So strong partnerships with different actors. Yes, thank you. We have a network, a European integration network with the member states, with the central government, of course, the national authorities. And this is something which we have developed a lot in the last years because we have developed mutual learning activities, study visit exchanges, where really the member states can learn from each other about good practices and tools developed on integration. Of course, very important, and this is where I will develop a little bit more later on, the partnerships with local and regional authorities. We have developed activities under the urban agenda. We have a partnership on inclusion and integration of migrants and refugees. And we are now building a partnerships with the Committee of the Regions I will explain all of this a bit more in details in the next slides. Of course, partnerships with host communities, civil society, this is really essential for effective integration policies, and with the social and economic partners. We have also concluded since 2017 a partnership with economic and social partners on labor market integration of refugees in particular, where we have developed a number of activities in this area on how we can cooperate with the social partners on labor market integration. And this partnership was renewed last September also, with a number of activities foreseen in the different areas. Next slide, please. So we have had a number of proposals and measures in the action plan on how to cooperate with cities and regions. I have mentioned the partnership with the Committee of the Regions. We had already cooperated with the committee since a couple of years when they launched their initiative Cities and Regions on Integration, and we supported as Commission, as DG Home, a number of activities in that area, really to foster the cooperation between local and regional authorities. And now we will really formalize this partnership. It will be signed in a couple of weeks, actually, at the next plenary of the Committee of the Regions. Our Commissioner Johansson, will be there. And we will really develop under this partnership very concrete activities to really build capacity and promote exchanges between local and regional authorities. As we have done with the member states in the European Integration Network. The Urban Academy, this is something that we had already launched a few years ago as a pilot, really having it was a 2-3 days program for local practitioners on different areas, topics on integration at a local level. And now we really want to, together with the committee, to develop this into a comprehensive capacity building program for local and regional authorities. And then we have also a number of activities, and this is also under the prevention of radicalization agenda, really to how they can cooperate together to fight against radicalization. Next slide, please. So now the support to local and regional authorities. Of course, funding, it's a key aspect. And on this, I think it's something that the Commission is really asked very often, rightly so, particularly by the municipalities and the region. How can an effective access to funding be promoted? Now, one of the first things that I would like to mention is that in the next multi-annual financial framework, which is starting now this year, we have really improved a bit the access to funding for local and regional authorities to the extent possible. First of all, I want to say that in the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, which is the fund that we manage as DG Home, with an allocation of 10 billion overall, we have now increase the share that it's of course to a large extent managed by the member states through share management. This is how the funding is structured, but there is now around 40% which will be managed centrally, the thematic facility, by the Commission, and that also allows also to devote a certain percentage of this thematic facility to projects and activities developed by local and regional authorities. We also have higher co-financing rates for projects developing at local level, up to 90%. And we also have one improvement compared to the old AMIF, is also the fact that now the so-called partnership principle, which already applied to the regional and structural fund, whereby the central authorities really have to work together with the local authorities, with civil society and more relevant actors in the management of the funds. Now this also applies to the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. And this is very important because really all these actors, particularly for integration, not only, but need to be associated from the programming phase until implementation of the activites. Also in general, even under the shared management that is managed directly by member states, 50% of this money has to be allocated to integration. And this is also very important. This is also something new. But aside only the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, which has limited allocations compared to structural funds. It's very important that we have specific objectives now on integration in the European Social Fund Plus and in the European Regional Development Fund, which of course, especially the Regional Development Fund is accessible directly, of course, by regions. And there is a specific objective, so there will be measures financed under these funds also for integration. And this is important to ensure synergies between the funds. This is something that we have always already in the past year worked together with the member states authorities to really encourage them to use these funds in synergies for their projects. And this will be even more the case for the next multi-annual financial framework. And there is a toolkit that is being developed indeed on how to use in a complementary way all these funds for integration. Also to say that one of the priorities of the call for transnational projects that we have launched under the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund last year is about developing and implementing local integration strategies. So this is also something that can help. We had already financed calls for transnational projects about to create a network of cities and regions, and we had financed 8 transnational projects on that. So all of this, we believe it's really important to support the role of the local and regional authorities on integration. Next slide, please. Of course, what is important is not only the authorities, it's also really to involve the local communities. And indeed, we have also these specific actions in the action plan. Involved in the design and implementation of integration program. As I said, this will be covered also by the partnership principle in the new multi-annual financial framework. So there will be really an obligation to involve all the authorities. Then, some other of the practices of the measures is really the financing of projects to promote volunteering, co-designed by migrants and host communities. This is also part of the priorities under the fund. Next slide, please. Yes, and then of course the partnership on inclusion of migrants and refugees. This I have briefly mentioned before. This is something that was developed under the urban agenda already under the previous funding period, with the City of Amsterdam in the lead and DG Home coordinating this. And this is something that will be continued and has been extended until 2021. And really, it's very important because it brings together cities, national authorities, and the European Commission to work together on integration. Because it's not only the multi-stakeholders, it's also the multi-governance that is important. So all levels of governance cooperating together. I think that the City of Athens used to be part. Now it's no more part of the partnership, but of course you are welcome to come back and to participate in the development of the activities in the future. Next slide, please. So participation and encounters with civil society. As I said, this is also one horizontal strand of the action plan because we consider it really very important to foster integration and have really cohesive societies. And we have foreseen a number of measures also in the action plan that we will develop in the next years. Now, community sponsorships is something which is really a priority for us and for our commissioner. It's linked to resettlement and to humanitarian admission, but it's really important to prepare the arrival and to favor the integration of beneficiaries of international protection in local communities. Other actions have to do with integration award for the schools, for the local communities, artistic and cultural organizations, sports, football festivals. We have an agreement with UEFA for integration activities through sports in connection with the European Football Championship, which we hope is taking place later this year. And also other projects to raise awareness on facts and figures and main trends of integration for journalists. Next slide, please. Yes, now, coming to Greece in particular, I want to mention a few activities and few actions. First of all, there is a mutual assistance program that had been planned since 2019, actually, involving local authorities, national, regional local authorities in Greece, and also in Austria and Italy, really to develop action and to learn from each other in the field of integration of migrants and refugees. This program has been put on hold due to COVID, but will take place in 2022. I mean, so this is already planned. There have been, and this is financed under AMIF, under the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. Then we have had Information Center for Migrants, of which you are surely aware, that have been financed under the European Social Fund, and that operates across 19 municipalities in Greece and hopefully can be expanded. And then we had also another specific project financed under the Regional and Development Fund, Curing the Limbo, really to promote the social integration of migrants at regional and local level with the city of Athens and other partners. Next slide, please. Well, this is a bit the conclusion. You have here the reference and the links to other information on our website, of course, and also on the urban agenda and urban academy. And but if there are other questions, of course, I'm available still today to discuss. Thank you very much. Micro.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Corrado. I have put down some very key words, I think, from your speech concerning the involvement of migrant communities, the networking of organizations at local, national, and supranational levels, and of course the synergies between funds for the new program period, very important issues, I think, that you have to see afterwards during our discussion. I have one question, but I think that we have first to listen to Ms. Daskalaki, Executive Advisor for Migrants and Refugees at the Municipality of Athens, for her experience, her expertise concerning the space of the immigration. Ms. Daskalaki, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you for the invitation. I will attempt to speak about the involvement of the City of Athens and the ways we implement up to now the policies already Mrs. Corrado talked about. We try to co-shape the new environment created by increased and diversified migration flows and the concentrations we have. I will briefly also discuss the potentials and the limitations we face regarding the integration of migrants and refugees. The current public health crisis has shown us that challenges which are transnational in nature and local in effect have to be dealt with in a different manner. On the one hand, there is a need for a sustainable, holistic, effective, and humane approach to managing migration at a European level and with the neighboring countries. And on the other hand, at a national level, centrally designed policies need to define roles and responsibilities in a national integration system. Local governments play a de facto critical role in the specific management and integration strategy for beneficiaries of international protection, especially in the formulation and implementation of integration policies. Local governments are in closer contact with civil society and have a better understanding of the specific needs of the vulnerable groups and the local culture, which is a critical factor in any integration process. What are our limitations and challenges? The challenges we face are known to you. A simple issue, for instance, but one of great importance, is the lack of interpreters in critical areas such as health. Long waiting time for an asylum application and difficulties in obtaining a social security number, a bank account, etc., are also very well-known issues. The labor market is a particular challenge, given the high unemployment rates we face in Greece the recent years, the current phase of the economic crisis, and the conditions prevailing due to COVID-19. Major issues also include challenging anti-migrant and refugee discourses and sensitizing the general population towards the other, as well as dealing with fear and hate speech and radicalization. there is a need to empower everyone in both host and migrant communities to work together in making the impact of migration humane for both communities and creating social cohesion. Migrants and refugees already integrated need to become more active and engaged in creating positive paradigms for their communities. Our responsibility is to work for the protection of the human rights of migrants, refugees, and trafficking survivors and all vulnerable populations. On the bright side, the good news is that several actions and activities related to integration are taking place, the most important part having to do with language learning and the acquisition of basic skills that facilitate access to the labor market. Some of our best practices are the development of coordination mechanism at the local level that was of prime concern in order to facilitate the circulation of information and the dialogue within communities, other organizations, and between municipalities. Primary issue is the cooperation between local authorities. For example, through the Cities of Integration network that the city of Athens created. 17 now municipalities in Greece are taking part in the Cities for Integration network and cooperating knowledge exchange, capacity building, policy development, and actions for refugee integration. Cooperation with all organizations in the field of integration is also a priority through mechanisms such as the Athens Coordination Center for Migrant and Refugee Issues, the ACCMR, that includes almost 130 organizations, and its main goal is the efficient coordination between the municipal authorities and stakeholders operating within the city in order to shape the necessary conditions for the smooth integration of migrants and refugees and promote social coherence. On the third hand, thirdly, a cooperation with the communities is a priority via the Council for the Integration of Migrants and Refugees, the CEB. In this way, migrant communities are involved themselves in the design, implementation, and evaluation of programs where they are important stakeholders. Lately, for example, the Council met in the presence of our Mayor, Kostas Bakoyannis, and we discussed the plan to coordinate a prevention and awareness campaign for COVID-19 through the provision of information material in different languages. Same now with the vaccination. The smooth operation of the open facility of asylum applicants and vulnerable individuals of Eleona is also a priority for the city of Athens. In addition to the smooth living with the natives, because Eleona is sited in the middle of Athens, the city of Athens, through its cooperation with other agencies operating within the facility and the ministry, moves in the direction of upgrading the services provided, such as support in the issuance of social security number, fiscal code, interconnection of its integration programs with the facility, education of the children, etc. Moreover, the participation through the development agency, which I represent also, EATA, in housing the program Estia, made the city one of the strategic partners of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in the past, up to the end of 2020, and now of the Ministry of Asylum. We deal with 320 apartments, we manage them, and we have approximately 2,000 vulnerable asylum seekers hosted. The Migrant Integration Center of the City of Athens, KEM, operates as a local reference point for the provision of specialized services, psychological support, legal counseling, and information on social rights to refugees and migrants. There are also social inclusion activities such as Greek, English, and IT courses, professional counseling, and intercultural activities that now, of course, because of COVID-19, are held back, but we will continue as soon as we will be able to. KEM collaborated with the most famous soccer team of Athens. I won't mention WHO, because I support the opposite team, which provided a number of free tickets for migrants and refugees to attend its matches. It also collaborated with Attendo Cumbros Academy, which is the academy that created the famous NBA player, in order to give vulnerable migrant and refugee children the opportunity to learn how to play basketball. We also assess the demand and provide volunteering opportunities for refugees. As Mrs. Corrado mentioned, through the implementation of Curing the Limbo, which is a pilot initiative and Sinathina project, we focus on refugees themselves as they are becoming socially active and integrated into city life, which allows them to interact with their neighborhood, the city, fellow residents, and the citizens. For example, we had in the past the Victoria Square project, which was one of the best examples that challenged the problem of vacant spaces in Athens, since more than 150 activities have taken place in collaboration with the local community, businesses, public institutions, municipal programs, international and local artists, etc. Concluding my speech, cities, local authorities, and municipalities have more direct exposure to migration. Therefore, they can play a decisive role in welcoming migrants and refugees, providing facilities to meet their basic needs, giving opportunities for their integration, and helping them access services, education, and employment. Moreover, with increasing globalization and the new technologies, migrants affect not only their country of origin, but also interim stops and the country of destination. As a result, international cooperation activities carried out between 2 or more local authorities are very much needed in order to promote international collaboration on migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daskalaki. Very interesting speech concerning the initiatives of the municipality of Athens on this issue. I've been aware of some of them. I'm not the expert on the issue, I have to be honest with you. But since I've been working and I'm very interested in the network, city networks, I've been aware of the participation of the municipality of Athens to the Cities for Integration network, and the project have been launched. Before we move on, couple of questions I have for you. I would like to remind our representatives from municipalities from Greece and other European countries to send us their questions, their remarks, so we have a discussion on this issue. But before that,
Adonis, sorry, just one clarification that representatives of municipalities from Greece and beyond, they could also take the floor for short interventions and questions, not only the chat.
Thank you for that, Nikos. Ms. Corrado, just a question I had when I read the agenda of this panel. I thought that the major issue, one of the major issues that these policies of integration have to tackle is the housing issue. I have read some reports, I don't know if they are the most representative at the European level. I read that the housing subsidies have a diverse impact in European countries. I mean, in some countries have no effect on the cost overburden, the housing cost overburden of migrants, but in some others, these housing subsidies have alleviated their situation. What is your opinion on this? I mean, if the action plan has touched this issue.
Yes, thanks very much for this. I mean, access to housing, I mentioned it at the beginning, we have identified as one of the key thematic areas in the action plan, because the access to affordable and adequate housing is key really to integration, of course, together with access to, language training, access to labor market. But I mean, without proper housing solution, it's true that this impacts also other aspects. Now, this is something that, of course, differs. The situation of the housing market differs across member states. So it's certainly difficult to give one specific solution. I mean, that is valid for all, and that's what we acknowledge. But we did encourage member states to, in the action plan, to really consider housing as together in a let's say, coordinating approach with other policies fostering integration, so access to employment and other aspects. I think the subsidies can certainly be helpful, I mean, to a certain extent, and I think it's part of also one of the projects implemented in Greece. Helios includes also this, and it's certainly useful in certain situations, but it's not enough. I mean, we have had a number of creative solutions in some member states, in some projects that we have co-financed, for example, of co-housing, where you had really projects where you had migrants and refugees together with local people sharing co-housing solutions, and with support, of course, and support also in terms of, accompanying to integration in social activities, cultural. So this is something that can contribute, not only can be a housing solution, but it can also contribute to foster integration in the society. So I would say there isn't really a unique solution, but we have encouraged, and we encourage member states to try to have, let's say, coordinated, comprehensive approach where housing is part of, let's say, an integration policy, where, of course, solutions are also targeted a bit to the situations, the national and local situation. So I would say certainly can be useful to have subsidies as part of a more general policies to ensure affordable and adequate housing for migrants and for refugees. And of course, we have support through not only the Regional Development Fund, there is InvestEU that can contribute also to support housing for migrants. And in general, I mean, I think we have a policy to support affordable housing for everybody. I mean, it's not only about migrants, but it's true that migrants can have also suffer from discrimination in access to the housing market. So there can be also a need for targeted solution. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think the issue is very important here. What you say that you cannot have a uniform policy on this issue, taking into account that migrants have different characteristics and different preferences for location. So yes, they face different problems. So one fits for all solution is, in my mind, I think is impossible in this respect. And of course, I go to Mr. Skalaki I want to tell us something concerning the impact on the initiatives of the municipality. I mean, have you measured the reactions of local populations concerning these initiatives? How, to what extent they cooperate with the municipality during this implementation of these initiatives of the local authority?
We have a broad collaboration with the civil society, yes, but local population, I don't think was never up to now very eager and very willing to collaborate. And we all know it's a difficult thing to admit, but we should make this bitter note that we all know the problems in the schools, for example, in almost all neighborhoods with the children of migrants and refugees. I think a big problem of our society, in Athens at least, I mean in all Attica, because Athens is a de facto also metropolitan municipality, because it receives and people transfer through Athens. and they live here and they work abroad, or the opposite. So in Attica, I think we face the problem of radicalization, which is a problem inherited from the years of economic crisis before. What happened, for example, in the housing, what happened is that many neighborhoods were very degraded. In those neighborhoods, the rents went down. In those neighborhoods, because the rents were down, was easier for both the NGOs or the stakeholders of the STIA program and the migrants themselves to find apartments, and that created an even worse degradation of the as it is perceived by the locals. Okay, and in the same time, Athens has shown for the past 5 years and up to now, despite the crisis of COVID, and a touristic raise and development. And so some neighborhoods are very, very popular, and they become, the rents there go high, and in the same time, the other neighborhoods go down. So our mayor, Mr. Bakoyannis, has, I think, understood very well that problem. And what we try, besides the direct refugee and migrant problem, is to bridge those differences, to get those two kind of neighborhoods in Athens be more close and fill that gap. Because if we had half Athens rich and extroversial and everything, and the other half like a ghetto, this is a very good thing, a very bad factor for radicalization. So it's what we try to do to soothe a little the problems of the degraded neighborhoods, which are, I must admit, reasonable. I don't agree with the way they express themselves at all, but I understand the causes. And I think if we don't understand and recognize their feelings, the feelings of the people that they become radicalized, we won't heal the problem.
Yes, I think we come back to what you earlier said, and Ms. Corrado, about even you, when you said about the involvement of migrant communities and the design of policies. I think this that all the municipalities have to face, and it is not just rhetorical or just part of a declaration of tolerance that we want them, yes, with us when we design new policies, initiatives, but at the end, the implementation phase, the local communities are absent from this phase. And yes, I understand these diverse reactions from local populations, and the major issue that the municipality have to sensitize and put them in the spotlight, or the problems, the needs of the local populations, and don't segregate, the various communities in different parts of the metropolitan area. So yes, the new programming period, I come back to Ms. Corrado, provides in most of European programs, I think, for synergies. To be honest, I haven't understood to what extent this synergy, what they cover. I mean, in terms of the funding and the various actions of the programs. I don't know if you have a definite, picture about what the European program, which European programs will touch these issues in the new programming period. I mean, I have one in my mind, for instance, the rights, equality, and citizenship, this program that is under the umbrella of the SERV, the Citizens Equality, Rights and Values program. I don't know if I'm very curious about these synergies in order to make life of these communities, of this organization, more easier to find, to have access to EU funds for the programming period. This is my question, if you have some.
Yes, thank you. No, it's an important question, and of course, I mean, it's something that needs to be looked at also concretely. Then, when the member state do the programming for the different funds in cooperation, as I said, with the local and regional authorities, now also for the AMIF program. I have mentioned some of the main funds, but there are others, and including the Citizenship and Values program that can contribute to the different actions. I mean, we in the Asylum, Migration, and Integration Fund, I mean, we didn't want to have also a strict division of what can be financed or not, but AMIF, it certainly remains the funds to finance the early integration activities and integration programs. It has finances horizontal activity like supporting integration strategies at national, local level, and many other things. It can also support, some preparatory actions for labor market integration. So there isn't really a strict thematic or other division, because we wanted to keep some flexibility. Now, of course, other funds are more targeted, meaning that the social funds, it's more labor market integration, but also social inclusion. So that there is a component really on social inclusion that is very important. And that's the advantage of these other funds is also they don't have constraints on legal basis like we have under AMIF, which has to focus on third country nationals. The social funds, the regional funds can really support actions that are broader for the whole communities, the whole society. So which is also part of the, let's say, the comprehensive approach, like we want really to build cohesive societies, as it was mentioned by Ms. Daskalaki. It's important that, the community feels part of it, and that it is not us versus them. It's really, we are building societies where everybody can eventually belong to. The regional development funds, it's more, of course, infrastructures, housing, and so on. InvestEU, it's quite broad. It can also really support social integration, labor market, and also housing. We have some education activities, even Erasmus Plus can intervene. And all the actions on inclusive societies, encounters, and so on, also the Citizenship and Values program. There are also other funds that can contribute to that, but I think really the synergies has to be looked at, and this we have already started doing this under all the programming frameworks, really to bring in together the managing authorities of the different funds, particularly AMIF, social fund, regional funds. We work very closely with our colleagues working on regional policies on employment policies to ensure that member states would really concretely and in practice take this into account in the programming phase already. And we are still doing this because, of course, there are a lot of actions that are really developed under the different funds and programs. So we are doing this coordination is needed on the European level, and this we are doing it within the European Commission, but then also national level, because sometimes you have different managing authorities for the different funds, and sometimes some funds go directly to regions, like the regional funds. So there has to be really a coordination at all levels on this, the programming stage, and then implementation and monitoring stage. It's not an easy job, but of course it needs to be done also really to maximize the impact of these funds for the member states, for the local and regional communities. So this is really the effort and the challenge that we have for the next multi-annual financial framework. But I think there are a lot of good novelties in the legal frameworks, which we really need to implement now correctly.
I have a question concerning AMIF, if there is a possibility for local authorities to have access to this funding.
Well, as I said, it's AMIF, it's a program, and this has not entirely changed, that it really, there is one part, it's about 60%, which goes through national authority through share management. So it's not like the regional fund. This couldn't really be changed. But then there is the thematic facility, which is horizontal, which is managed by the Commission, that then can support actions that target directly local and regional authorities. And then, as I said, there is a higher co-financing rate. There is a 5% that at least has to be devoted to that. So there is a little bit more margin than we have today to finance projects that would concern local and regional authorities. That's for sure, in addition to the calls that we have already launched in the past for transnational projects, but this will be an improvement. Of course, it's a fund that is essentially, to a large part, managed through the national authorities, but
Yes.
there are additional possibilities.
Yes, yes. So, okay, I stop my questions here. I think that the floor is for our participants. If somebody wants to raise a question for our experts here, our speakers, if there's a question for Mrs. Kalaki or Mrs. Corrado.
There is a raised hand, Andoni. We will give the floor to the respective participant in a couple of seconds.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Jan, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't see anything, so therefore I don't know. One of the problems is that now we all know for example, integration policies is to be done on a local level, and what we see is that for example, the AMIF fund is going through national agencies. And national agencies sometimes have other ideas of what the best integration policy is than the local level. And then the AMIF funds don't reach the local level in many cases throughout Europe. I know that because I'm a member of Eurocities Working Group Migration. There is the fund Urban Innovative Action that is directly funding on different topics, cities. Is there a possibility that there will be also direct funding from the AMIF to cities? Because I'm 100% sure that the innovation will be booming because of that. And now it's a bit blocked in the cities, not only in the Netherlands, but in the whole of Europe.
Yes, Ms. Corrado, I think.
Yes, I know that there is always a lot of interest, and rightly so. Yeah, rightly so on the funding aspect. It's normal. It's well, as I have said, I mean, AMIF remains a fund that, I mean, by its own nature, the large part of the amount is allocated through shared management, so to national programs by member states. So this about 60%. But as I said, compare at least to the old Asylum Migration Integration Fund, there is a larger share, around 40%, which is the thematic facility, which is managed centrally. And of that, as I said, there will have to be at least 5% of the amount that has to be dedicated to programs and projects targeting local and regional authorities. And as I also said, that the projects which are really implemented by local and regional authorities have a higher co-financing rate, up to 90%. As I have also said that, and this is also something new compared to the past, that now member states will be bound by the partnership principle, which is the one that already we had in the structural funds, but in AMIF it was much softer, let's say. So the member states, you know, they were not so strongly bound to involve the local regional authorities. Some member states, they already did, others less, but now we have a stronger principle which really obliges them to do so, to coordinate with the local and regional authorities, with the civil society, and so on. Of course, this needs to be monitored, this needs to be correctly implemented. And of course, we will continue to finance call for projects. I know there were some questions about the difficulties for small municipalities, and that's why we encourage really the partnerships. I mean, the projects that we have financed, it's not only about big cities. It's really important to build partnership with organizations like Eurocities and others, and with other municipalities across member states. The simplification, I think there has been an effort. I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but there has been an effort at least to align the requirements, for example, between AMIF and the social fund, at least in the Commission proposals, in terms of how to calculate the cost and so on. I hope that this has been maintained in the final text, which have just been very recently approved, at least for the AMIF. So there is an effort, of course. It remains complex in terms that I am aware. We have tried to simplify it what was possible for the new AMIF. And I think that what I have mentioned in terms of novelties will really help to get more funding to the local and regional authorities eventually. So I hope this will bring good results. We will speak again shortly to see when the programs, the new AMIF and the new other programs are implemented to make the point. But I am confident that this will make a difference also in the allocation of the funds. Thank you.
The other issue, Ms. Corrado, is about the operational funding of the organizations, which plan, you know, on a multi-annual basis. So I think there is an issue here about the organizations who are very close to migrant communities to know what about their operational, you know, funds, and to what extent this new programming period can cover these demands for constant funding for these organizations.
Well, this is difficult, of course, because we cannot really provide grants directly. I mean, it's very, very difficult, I mean, under AMIF. So we really need to focus on the projects that can also have a, you know, longer duration and can support that for networks that they support. I mean, I think we will look at all the possibilities in the future AMIF to see how we can support. I think, as I said, from the Commission side, there is certainly a willingness to support as much as we can, also through funding the local and regional authorities. Of course, we have the constraints within the legal basis of our funds, but certainly we're happy to pursue the dialogue with all the organizations to see how we can further improve. I mean, with the new opportunities by the new Asylum Migration Integration Fund and other funds, as I mentioned. Let's not underestimate the fact that there will be specific objectives, and this is new in the Social Fund Plus, in the Regional Development Fund, and in others to cover also integration actions.
Mm-hmm. So, much question, very many comments on this funding issue that I think is very core and very interesting for most of the organizations. Do we have other questions from the public, from participants? Most of the questions, I think, have been answered from the experts. Anybody wants to raise an issue for our experts from the participants, from other municipalities, to share with us their experience on policy integrations?
Yeah, maybe we can give a couple of minutes to reflect and go ahead with the questions. In the meantime, maybe Mrs. Daskalaki could reflect on the issue of funding and the questions raised from her perspective as an executive advisor. Mm-hmm.
I was ready to do it by myself because yesterday I followed for the first panel, I think, and as our collaborator of Mr. Sarelakos said, I think a problem that occurs every time in our conversation with the other municipalities and all the stakeholders is that the funding is on a project basis. I think we need to go to the next step both national authorities and the EU, everyone needs to think of the migration and refugee issue as an issue of social inclusion in general and integration in general, a social issue, and deal with the problem and not with specific population, let's say, of different origin. It's not that. Our country, and I mean Europe as my country because I'm very pro-Europe, our big country needs to build a policy, an ongoing policy for the future for the social inclusion issues. The project basis funding does not guarantee the sustainability, so all our efforts remain somewhere, somehow back, because you can't plan a policy if you don't know whether in the end of 1 year or 2 years you won't have the funds. As we have a policy for education, a standard policy for education, we must have the same standard policy through the years for the social integration and inclusion of all kinds of vulnerable people, from people that come from, I don't know, from trafficking, or from people that have are for many years jobless, for people that haven't followed the education of 9 years or 12 years, for all those people, regardless of their origin. And it's another issue how you protect the European area from massive migration and refugee flows. This is another issue. We must have policies to protect reasonably our space, but we have also we are obliged to have also policies for the integration for the peoples we have accepted, either de jure or de facto.
Yeah, if I can maybe add something on that. I mean, of course, the sustainability of the projects, of the actions is very important, but that's why I think this has to come really through the national programs. And I mean, as I said, what is important, and this was not this was for AMIF, but not for other funds, 15% at least, even of the share management has to go to integration policy. And on the social funds, if I'm not wrong, it's around 20% that has to be invested in social policies, social inclusion policies. So I think it's really also the responsibility of member states to really use these funds, different funds, also to foster the inclusion, as you say, in a global and holistic way. I mean, to really, and this is also the approach that we had in the action plan. It's not all integration, it's really part of the agenda on inclusion and cohesive societies. So for that, there is support from EU funds. And so it's really up to the member states to really design policies that can foster that in everybody's interest. I mean, it's we all want to have cohesive societies. Nobody wants to favor marginalization, segregation, or radicalization. I think no member states wants that. So we really need to invest into this, into the different aspects.
Ms. Konrado, do you have an idea about the timetable of the application procedure for the new funding?
Well, I think, as I said, we have just, I think, had the adoption last week of the legal instruments of at least the funds on the migration field. I think social funds, I'm not even sure it's formally adopted. So it will take now a little bit of time to really finalize adoption and prepare the work programs and launch the new calls for applications for AMIF. The latest one that we launched in October 2020 was just closed in February. And as I said, there was one priority about designing local integration strategies. So this is just closed and it's under evaluation. So it will take a few months, I think, for the finalization, because the program, the legal basis have just been adopted. And we will have a work program covering 2 years, so then 2021, 2022 under AMIF. And then on that basis, we will then see the new codes for applications and new programs. And of course, member states, once they have implemented this in their national programs, and then they will also have to use these fundings for different projects. So we are already discussing with member states about the priorities, the programming, of course, in this period.
Okay. Another issue raised by one participant is concerning the capacity building issue of NGOs in the field of fundraising. To what extent this will be covered by the new funding instruments, and this.
Yes, I mean, I think this is part of the capacity building. As I said, this is also something we want to support. So in general, yes, I mean, it can be covered under, I think, the different funds, including AMIF.
Mm-hmm. I have seen another issue here. No. I totally agree with what Mr. Skalaki said about this project-based approach of policy integration, because this requires, I think, only you can tell us from the perspective of municipality of Athens. This requires, I think, the first internal organization, human resources development, and of course local democracy tools. I think if the sustainability is the stake, is what we are after, I think the issues that have to be tackled first will be internally in the organizations at the organization level, and later on externally the relationship with the local communities. What do you think, Mr. Skalaki, on this?
Could you repeat, because I had a call in between, I had to answer a message.
Yes, what you said about the project-based approach concerning the integration policy, I think I'm totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the issue of sustainability touches the internal organization of the municipality first. I mean, to what extent there is a human resource development on this issue. What about the structures of the municipality? And on the other hand, there is the issue, what you said, the relationship between municipality and local communities, local population. I think here the local democracy tools play a role to cultivate a relationship of trust between organization, municipality, and the population. I think in this way, yes, I can see that project-based approach will have a perspective that is will have a sustainable impact. Otherwise, this personal view, I agree with you that there is no prospect other than deliverable and just that.
The project-based funding has a negative impact in the organization, the structure of the services, the permanent services of the municipalities. You know, a municipality, a Greek municipality such as Athens, is a very large organization, and I could say we cannot think in a serious way, and we cannot respect a domain in which we don't have an organic plan, in which we work circumstantially with projects that cannot create a culture of working on this, an internal institutional culture on working on this field. we should add in this problem the problem we have in not the inertia that a Greek municipality, a Greek institution has to find the people, the people they need to build the capacity. We are not very agile in that, as we all know. So I think what we need is to decide that we will need in the future a steady and policy and build a capacity, an internal capacity for that policy. And in addition to that, for the purpose to being more agile and more adaptive, have also some projects outside the institution. That's the best, I think, practice we should follow.
Adonis, maybe I could briefly take the floor for a question to Ms. Corrado. And also before that, I would like to strongly encourage in Greek or in English our participants to ask questions, to raise hands and take the floor and ask questions. To Ms. Corrado, my question is there any provision for smaller for smaller municipalities to be supported through capacity building or through a more simple procedure of application for being financed by AMI program? Because it's quite clear to everyone working in the field that the capacities, I know from the experience of Greece and a few other countries maybe, of smaller institutions, smaller communities to provide the human resources and then have the application, which is quite complex, applied for and being approved and so on, it is quite unrealistic. So is there a provision to support smaller institutions? And if so, and if not, maybe is this something you could take into account?
Yes, I mean, the procedures for the applying for the funds are quite standard and are also, you know, done in a way to ensure accountability of the budget. I mean, there is a limit to what you can simplify, unfortunately. I hear your pain, I know, and it's not, but it's, you know, we try to simplify as much as possible, but of course, the application process, I cannot tell you that will be super easy. But I also have to say that in the calls that we have had, it's not that we only have big cities or also in the networks of local regional authorities. So that's why I think it's important. And we are trying to do regularly. We have done encounters with all the different projects, or when we provide information on the calls, it's also somehow to support also those that are maybe less familiar. So I mean, we are happy to, you know, to continue this conversation and to see how we can further help. But I think my advice would really be to really work with the organizations that can support also the smaller municipalities and to develop partnerships within the member states and across also where possible, because I think we have seen that there are also, you know, networks that have been developed for the projects with also smaller municipalities. Of course, it's easier for a big city or for organization, but that's why I think you really need to try to build partnerships about this. But I'm happy, you know, we are happy to further discuss how we can help you. I mean, the idea it's indeed not only to have big cities involved, and I think also in the network that the committees of the regions and is developing, it's also meant to involve also smaller cities or smaller regions to really give more visibility. So I hope also the work that we will do in the context of the partnerships in terms of really mutual learning and so on will also help building capacities for smaller municipalities. I would really encourage you also to be part of that network, of that initiative, so that we can see how to support you in this capacity building in general on integration, but also on how to access the funding. I mean, I hope this is helpful. I mean, I don't want to promise you things that then will remain a bit complex, but we are happy to support in terms of the capacity building for sure.
Yeah. So, of course, this issue about the small municipalities is very very wide. There is not just the funding, it's the structural issues that have first these organizations to work it out, and later on to see what is best for them in terms of funding, okay, and in terms of their characteristics and preferences, the target groups that they have to, you know, support. It's a very wider issue. I agree that the technical issues seem discouraging for most of the small municipalities, and that's why I have noticed that the European Commission has showed some sensitivity the last, especially the last programming period, and I hope that it could continue in the new programming period, because yes, the major cities have a way to solve their problems in terms of funding, not just seeking for European funding, but also other sources. But for smaller organizations, maybe it's the only way to see that they can tackle their problems in a more efficient way, with very few own resources. So I understand Nico's, you know, agony and pain in this issue. I don't know, we have other questions from our audience. I think it was a very fruitful discussion on this issue of policy integration and segregation. I insist that the issue is not just an elite-based planning, but an interaction between organizations and local population. I think this is the key to most of the problems that we face as societies. The European Commission just give us the chance to put some of these problems in the spotlight and support specific target groups. But on the other hand, I agree that the project-based approach should be broadened on the national level. Within, I think, this multi-level governance approach between this relationship between local authorities, regional authorities, national authorities, European Union. I think this multi-level approach should be our, I think, the key to most of these problems that we face on this issue.
Nikos, there's a question in the chat. Maybe Mrs. Daskalaki could
yes, from Valia. I just saw that from Mrs. Dimopoulou. We have already asked for money, and the money.
Excuse me, Mrs. Daskalaki. Maybe for the non-Greek speakers, we could. We will repeat the question in English. It would be useful to hear the planning that the municipality of Athens has, and if you are going to ask for participation in the funding program.
Yes. So we have already asked for money, and we have already signed a memorandum with the ministry for financing the new Leonas project, which will be a transit facility, as we called it, quote, transit facility for people that come out from other camps or STIA program, or they have been already recognized and they have not proper access to housing, or they haven't finished all their bureaucratic procedures, etc., and they end up camping in Athens's open spaces. which was a problem that we faced 2015-16, and we almost faced last summer, when massively people went out from the island camps. So the funding of that project is, I think, part of that funds through the ministry. We also work with the ministry, with the respective people in the ministry. We work on the integration plans. We have not only ideas on that, but we have the experience, what works, either in pilotic or in massive way. We know what works, besides the obvious of Greek language. Mainly, we think that we should have training of people, job skills in low specialization jobs, like handcrafts, like caregivers, like things like that. And we used to, months ago up to now, work with the ministry for implementing that kind of projects through the national policy, because we can't implement massively programs like that without the financing of either national money that come from EU or direct from EU. That's our collaboration.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that, Nikos, let's call it a day.
No, we won't call it a day. We will call it a panel, and because the day is long and is far from finished, we are shortly still young. Yes, we shortly will start with our panel on the era of COVID-19 in Europe, challenges and opportunities for social cohesion, with Mrs. Michelle Levoy, Director of PICUM, the Platform for International Cooperation for Undocumented Migrants, Mr. Sasha Marsang, Acting Secretary General at the European Public Health Alliance, and Mrs. Antigoni Liberaki, General Manager of Solidarity Now, chaired and facilitated by Manos Moschopoulos, who is a Senior Program Officer at the Open Society Initiative in Europe. So this is what is coming up. And 11 o'clock Central European Time, so in 7 minutes, we will start with a new panel. Thank you, everyone. Andonis, the floor is yours for wrapping up.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for our speakers. It was very, I think, fruitful discussion, and I would like to thank again Inter Alia for the invitation. Thank you, Mr. Skalaki. Thank you, Ms. Corrado.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.